you love me? I studied his face for clues. Can I love you? I looked deeply into his unblinking eyes. You can tell only so much from a photo, but I was searching for a connection. According to his pet finder profile, Peluso was an owner surrender, which is a nice way of saying that some mean person dumped him at a shelter. My coworker was planning to adopt the dog, and then she wasn't. Finding a pet online is a lot like finding a guy online. One seems good, great even, until you discover a bald spot or a bad habit like peeing on the carpet. And then it's click, 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 on to greener pastures. In Peluso's case, the problem was geographic undesirability. He was in Mexico, in the care of a group called Save a Mexican Mutt. It would be a month before he would be in Texas. My friend found a local dog to adopt instead. That's when I became interested. In his picture, he was a white ball of fluff on a multicolored rug. He was young, but he wasn't a tiny puppy. I'd experienced a puppy once, and I didn't want to do that again. And he was a poodle mix, and poodles are my thing. He'd been abandoned by his family, and that hurt my heart. Just 10 months prior, my beloved poodle Trellis died. When I adopted her, Trellis was 8 weeks old. She felt like a snow globe in my hands and gave me a strength I hadn't previously known. Within days of bringing her home, I ended a toxic romantic relationship that I had struggled against for years. In time, she and I would move from Alabama to Texas and then to New York City. She kept me steady through the confusion of my late 20s and comforted me during the abject misery of my mid-30s. She was smarter than some fifth graders, and funny too. I still laugh about the time she snatched a roll from a Brooklyn farmer's market and trotted proudly up Flatbush with the contraband carbohydrate between her teeth. I took impeccable care of her, planning for her to become the world's oldest living dog. She was my best friend, my sister, and my closest confidant. Trellis was my soulmate. So when a vet said she had a brain tumor, I was devastated. I spent 15 months and $10,000 keeping her alive. By the time I took my girl to relieve her of her suffering and delirium, she had no idea who I was. I held her in my arms while the doctor gave her injections to knock her unconscious and then stop her beating heart. Then I lay on the floor in the darkened room beside her while the warm pink insides of her ears went pale and cool. I cried, and I wished that I would die too. Even 10 months later, I was still raw. I knew that I would get another dog, but I wanted a year to recover financially and emotionally. That didn't mean, though, that I hadn't dabbled in the doggy dating pool. I volunteered for an animal rescue group. I walked dogs at weekend adoption events, solicited donations from people I knew, sold tickets at a fancy fundraiser, and took puppies to meet their hopeful new families. I even fostered a couple I considered keeping. I also spent countless hours looking through online profiles of adoptees. This was before Tinder, but metaphorically speaking, swiping left on perfectly acceptable Lhasa Apsos had become a way of life. It made me feel like a jerk. There was no way to rationalize why, out of the tens of thousands of pets available in North Texas, I felt compelled to adopt one from Mexico. All I can say is that not one of those dogs struck me as special the way Peluso did. The Spanish word peluso translates literally as a piece of lint. But it's also a word Mexicans use to lovingly call someone hairy. I loved the name the rescue had given him, and having a dog from a foreign country would make me seem exotic to people who don't know me. In the excitement of finding a pet I would adore, I hadn't questioned the legitimacy of Save a Mexican Mutt. It had a blog and a Facebook page. I'd even spoken to a woman named Kelly. But more than one friend raised a skeptical eyebrow. Getting a dog from Mexico? Had I ever tried to cross the border with so much as a burrito? One friend reminded me that a few years back, the DEA caught Colombian drug dealers smuggling smack in the bellies of some Labrador puppies. Was I sure I was getting a dog and not a drug mule? I wasn't, but I also wasn't listening to other people's opinions. I bought puppy food and ordered a silver name tag, and not knowing if this Mexican mutt would understand English, I emailed Kelly to ask her how to say basic commands in Spanish. It turns out Mexicans don't tell their animals to sit or call them good boy the way we do in the United States. So I just walked around my apartment saying, taco, amigo, guacamole. Finally, it was adoption day. Kelly asked if I could meet in a hotel parking lot in Las Colinas. That did seem like a red flag. Perhaps the whole thing was a ruse by the Mexican drug mafia. So I set a trap. I asked if she wanted the adoption fee in cash or check, figuring a drug dealer would prefer cold, hard cash. A check, she said, made out to Save a Mexican Mutt. A half hour later, exactly as promised, I saw a man and woman standing near their SUV with my fuzzy white dog. I parked my car and jumped out. In the late afternoon sun, I dropped to the sidewalk and scooped up my fluffer-nutter. He promptly stuck his tiny pink tongue up my nose and licked me boogers to brain. A trick that 5 years later, he still attempts with every new person he meets. I laughed with Kelly and her husband Jim, feeling a whole body joy edge out some of the pain of my previous loss. That day, I didn't get a dog full of drugs. Though Peluso did leave a few suspicious packages around the house in the days that followed. Kelly and Jim are not drug dealers. They're not even Mexican. They moved to San Miguel de Allende nearly 20 years ago and started Save a Mexican Mutt. Every month or so, they drive a carload of dogs across the border to their new homes in Texas. For Peluso and me, it was love at first sight, which almost never happens when you meet someone from a dating site. His presence in my life is a daily infusion of charm and delight. An animal with an uncommonly gentle spirit and the hair of Don King. He is unlike any creature I have ever known. Peluso spends a lot of time standing on his head, making little sing-song sounds. He is fiercely independent and will sit and stare at the sky for hours, contemplating the universe. And if he is tired, or just tired of you, he'll settle himself in a guest room or even a closet. I doubt I will ever feel about another dog the way I felt about Trellis. I depended on her the way a person might depend on a human friend, and I considered her part of me. Peluso occupies a different place in my heart. He's my amigo, and a sweet reminder that even if bad stuff happens to you, You can still be a shining light in the world. Everyone who meets him sees right away that he is exceptional. And that makes me feel exceptional, which is even better than seeming exotic to people who don't know me.
Mighty small, but it's better than no house at all. So ease it on over, move it on over, drag it on